My name is Grady, and I'm a night nurse at a hospital in New York. That night, I woke up to the bright light of Amara's cell phone screen, and that was a turning point in my married life. I opened my eyes to see Amara lying in bed texting rapidly. The clock read 3 a.m. I rolled over and pretended to be asleep, but inside I was alarmed by Amara's recent erratic behavior. Frequent overtime work and drinking out with coworkers. We've been married for 17 years, and it's never been like this. Are you okay? I asked cautiously. Amara jumped and quickly put her cell phone aside. Oh, it's nothing. It's just work. She sounded a little nervous. I didn't ask, but my suspicions were growing. Amara was a creative director at an advertising agency and was always busy at work, but lately she seemed to be a little too busy for her own good. At 4 a.m., I heard Amara get up. I got up quietly and saw her leaving the house all dressed up. She says she's going for a morning jog with her coworkers, but isn't it too early? I'm sitting in the living room, thinking about our married life. We've been together since we were 17. I remembered the way Amara's eyes curved up when she smiled on our first date. Now, that smile seems to be diminishing. Our lives have completely different rhythms. I work night shifts and sleep during the day. Amara works 9 to 5 and socializes at night. Slowly, the communication between us became less and less. I tried to keep up with her pace, but it was never easy. At 7 a.m., I texted Amara, "Honey, can I borrow your car to go to the grocery store? My car is in for service." 10 minutes later, Amara replied, "Sorry, I'm on my morning jog with my coworkers. You can pick up the car from my office." I sighed and decided to go to her office. On the way to the car, I thought back to the moments when we met and fell in love. The heartbeat when we first held hands, the tenderness of our first kiss, Amara's tears of surprise when we proposed. These beautiful memories now make my heart ache. When I got to Amara's office, I realized that her assistant, Lisa, didn't know where she was either. "Mr. Grady," Amara said she had an early meeting today, but I'm not sure exactly where. Lisa said apologetically. I nodded, my suspicions deepening. Amara never failed to tell her assistant about her schedule. I grabbed my car keys and drove home absent-mindedly. On the way, I called Amara. It took a long time for her to pick up. "Grady?" Her voice sounded a little breathy. "Nothing. Just wanted to make sure you were coming home." I tried to sound as calm as possible. "Oh, it might be a little late. It's been a busy day at work," Amara said. There seemed to be someone talking in the background, but the voice was muffled. "Okay, take care," I said and hung up. I parked my car and stood in front of my house, suddenly feeling weak. What had gone wrong between Amara and me? Was I too busy working and neglecting her? Or was it something else? I've decided to talk to Amara tonight. There was a rift in our marriage, but I was sure that if we worked together, we could fix it. I took a deep breath and pushed open the door. What I didn't know, however, was the storm that awaited me that would change my life forever. It was almost midnight when Amara got home. I was sitting on the couch in the living room with the TV on, but I wasn't listening to a word. When she walked in, our eyes met in the air, and in that moment, I felt like there was an invisible wall between us. "You're still awake?" Amara asked softly, taking off her heels. There was a hint of exhaustion in her voice, and nervous? I took a deep breath and mustered up the courage to say the words that had been playing on my mind for the past few days. "Amara, we need to talk?" She stiffened, then slowly turned to face me. "Yeah, what's up?" I stood up and walked over to her. "I think something is wrong between us. You've recently becoming very different." Amara avoids my gaze and starts organizing the contents of her bag. "I've just been a little busy at work. No big deal." "Yeah? Then why didn't Lisa know about your trip today?" I pressed. Amara's hand stopped. "You went to the office?" "Yes, I want to get my car. Don't you remember?" I paused. "Amara, if there's anything, you can tell me. We've always talked about everything, haven't we?" Amara looks up at me with a flash of emotion in her eyes that I can't read. "Grady, are you doubting me?" I don't know what to say to that. Yes, I suspected. But would saying it out loud make me seem too distrustful of her? We were silent for a moment, a suffocating tension in the air. Finally, I gathered my courage and uttered the request that had been haunting me. Amara, can I see your cell phone? Her eyes widened in disbelief. You're kidding, right? No, I don't. I said calmly while pulling out my own cell phone and handing it to her. Here's my cell phone and password. I have nothing to hide. Amara stared at the cell phone in my hand for a few moments, hesitating. Finally, she sighed and took her own cell phone out of her bag and handed it to me. My hands shook a little as I typed in the password she had told me. Amara had been watching with a complicated look on her face. I opened her text messages and started to scroll through them. Most of them were work-related, nothing special. But when I tried to view a conversation she had with a coworker named Mark, I realized that the entire record of the conversation had been deleted. Who's Mark? I asked, looking up and trying to control my tone. Amara's face changed. Just a coworker. Then why was the record of your conversation deleted? Amara was silent. I could see the struggle within her, as if she was weighing how much to say. Finally, she took a deep breath and said, Grady, Mark and I, we do have something special between us. I felt my heart stop a beat. How special is it? We didn't have any substantial relationship, Amara said hastily, but we do eat together and talk a lot. He understands me, Grady. He understands the pressures of my job and how I think. I stand up, feeling a little weak in my legs. So, you deleted the text because the content of your conversation wasn't appropriate for me to see? Amara lowered her head and didn't answer. That silence said more than any words ever could. Do you love him? I heard myself ask the question in a voice so foreign that it sounded like someone else was talking. Amara looked up with tears in her eyes. Grady, I don't know. I really don't know. I turned toward the door, needing some fresh air. Amara calls my name behind me, but I don't turn around. I walked out of the house, got in my car and started the engine. I didn't know where I was going, just wanted to get away from this home that was suffocating me. I drove through the streets of New York, neon lights blurring into a blur before my eyes. I thought back to our first date at that diner by the Brooklyn Bridge. Back then, we were full of hope, believing that love could conquer all. Without realizing it, I pulled up to the Brooklyn Bridge. I walked over to the bridge and looked out over the Manhattan skyline. Is this the end of 17 years of marriage? Were we still saved? I pulled out my cell phone and saw a dozen texts and missed calls from Amara. I didn't reply, just stared at the name that used to make my heart beat faster, but now I just felt a pang of heartache. The night breeze blew my thoughts away as I took a deep breath and decided to give myself and Amara some time and space. Maybe, just maybe, we could still find a way to start over. But at this moment, I needed to face this harsh reality alone. My marriage may have come to an end. After the confrontation that night, Amara and I came to an uncomfortable compromise. We decided to give each other some space, and I moved into the guest room. Days went by, and we lived under the same roof like two strangers. A week later, on Friday, I came home from my night shift to find Amara's car not in the garage. Normally, she'd be home at this hour. A sense of foreboding crept over me. I sat in the living room and stared at the wedding photos on the wall. We smiled so brightly back then, as if the whole world was at our feet. Now that happy moment seemed so far away. I don't know how much time passed, but I came back to my senses and realized that I had taken out my car keys without realizing it. I knew it was wrong, but I couldn't help myself. I drove to the neighborhood of Amara's office and stopped at the corner. After waiting nearly 2 hours, I finally saw Amara's car pull out of the parking lot. I followed, keeping a safe distance. Instead of going home, she drove under an upscale apartment building. I recognized it as where Mark lived. My heart sank. Even though I had a feeling about it, seeing it with my own eyes still sent a sharp pain through me. I parked my car and texted Amara, "Where are you?" A few minutes later, she replied, "Working late at the office. What's up?" I stared at the message and felt my stomach flip. I took a deep breath and replied, "Amara, I know you're lying. I'm downstairs in Mark's apartment. If you still care about our marriage, please come down and talk to me." After sending this message, I turned off my phone. I didn't want to see any excuses or explanations from her. I just wanted to know the truth, no matter how brutal it was. About 20 minutes later, Amara walked out of the building. She looked haggard and nervous, her eyes red as if she had been crying. She walked slowly to my car, and I lowered the window. "Get in the car," I said, "and let's find a place to talk it over." We drove to Brooklyn Bridge Park. This is where we always came on our dates. At the moment, the lights of Manhattan were twinkling across the river, and it was heartbreakingly beautiful. We sat on the bench and were silent for a long time. Finally, Amara spoke up. "Grady, I'm so sorry. I I betrayed you and our marriage." I closed my eyes and tried to control my emotions. Why? It was the only question I could ask. Amara lowered her head, her voice trembling. "I don't know. Maybe it's the stress of work. Maybe it's the growing distance between us. Mark makes me feel understood, valued. But I know that's no excuse." "Do you love him?" I asked that most dreaded question. Amara was silent for a moment, then shook her head. "I don't know. I thought I loved him, but now I'm not so sure, Grady. I screwed up everything." I look at her, the woman I've loved for half my life. I wanted to hate her, to yell at her, but I couldn't. Instead, I felt a deep sadness and exhaustion. "Can we ever get it back?" I asked softly, not sure if I was asking her or myself. Amara looked up, tears streaming down her face. "Are you still willing to forgive me?" I looked out over the river and thought about it. I remembered our wedding vows, through good times and bad. But can we really overcome this? "I don't know," I finally said. "I need time to think." "We all need it." Amara nodded and wiped away her tears. "I understand. I'll move out for a while. Give us both some space." We sat there and watched the stars appear one by one in the sky. Once, we sat like this, thinking about the future. Now the future has become so uncertain. We were both silent on the way home. When we arrived home, Amara packed up some essentials. Before she left, we stood in the doorway, looking at each other awkwardly. "Grady," Amara said softly, "I'm sorry no matter how this turns out. You're a good man, and you deserve better." I nodded, unable to speak. Watching Amara's car disappear around the corner, I felt a wave of loneliness I'd never felt before. I walked into the house, looked into the empty living room, and suddenly realized that my life was standing at a crossroads. Was it to forgive Amara and try to rebuild our marriage? Or end it all and start a new life? I sat on the couch, took out my phone, and hesitated for a long time. Finally, I opened a counseling app recommended by a friend. Maybe professional help would help me see myself more clearly. Outside the window, the night was deepening in New York. I know that no matter what choice I make, my life will never be the same. But at the moment, I just want to get a good night's sleep and face this cruel reality tomorrow. In the days after Amara moved out, I was a soulless shell, mechanically repeating my daily life. Go to work, come home, sleep, go to work again. I tried to fill my time with work, but every time the night got late, that feeling of emptiness would overwhelm me. A month later, I'm sitting in my lawyer's office, divorce papers in hand. Amara sits across from me, and we both avoid looking directly at each other. The lawyer was saying something, but all I could hear was a buzzing background noise. "Mr. Grady, you need to sign here." The lawyer's voice brought me back to reality. I looked at the spot on the document that required my signature, the tip of my pen hanging in the air. 17 years of marriage was about to end with that stroke. I took a deep breath and signed my name. Walking out of the lawyer's office, the New York sunlight stung my eyes. I didn't know where to go, so I walked aimlessly on the street. Without realizing it, I came to Central Park. The trees here were still so green. The laughter of the children was still so crisp, as if the whole world hadn't changed because of the end of my marriage. I sat on a bench, took out my cell phone and downloaded Tinder, staring at the flame icon for a long time, but finally clicked on it. When I was filling out my personal information, I paused for a long time in the marital status field and finally chose divorced. These two words were like a knife, cutting through my past and future. A few days later, I moved into a small apartment in Brooklyn. It was much smaller than the house Amara and I had, but it gave me a sense of a new beginning. I started redecorating, bought some new furniture, and even planted a few plants on the balcony. Taking care of these little creatures every day makes me feel like life goes on. My buddy Tom came to help me pack, and when he saw my Tinder account, He tapped me on the shoulder. Dude, don't rush to jump into another relationship. Give yourself some time. I smiled. Don't worry, I'm not ready. Just think it's time to move on. That night, I lay in my new bed, staring at the unfamiliar ceiling. My phone suddenly vibrated with a message alert from Tinder. I hesitated, but clicked on it. Hi, I'm Emma. Your dog in the photo is so cute. I looked at the message and had a strange feeling in my heart. I replied with a simple greeting and then we chatted. Emma was an elementary school teacher and also divorced. We talked about our jobs, favorite music, and even how we felt after the divorce. Without realizing it, we chatted until 2 in the morning. I woke up the next morning and realized that I had actually slept well. I looked at myself in the mirror and seemed a little more refreshed than yesterday. I decided to ask Emma to meet me. We had an appointment at a cafe in Brooklyn. The moment I saw Emma, I was suddenly nervous. She was even prettier than in her pictures and had a warm glow in her eyes when she smiled. So, you're a nurse? Emma asked, taking a sip of her coffee. I nodded, yes, night nurse. What about you? Like teaching kids? In this way, we talked for the whole afternoon. From work to hobbies, from childhood experiences to future plans. I found myself smiling, genuinely smiling, for the first time in a long time. At the end of our date, we decided to take a walk along the Brooklyn Bridge. The sun was setting and the golden sunlight was pouring over the river. It was mesmerizingly beautiful. Grady, Emma stops abruptly and turns to face me. I appreciate today's date, but I think you should know that I don't want to rush things. We've both been through painful separations, and I think we both need time. I looked into her eyes and felt a relief I had never felt before. I totally agree. Why don't we just be friends and see what happens next? Emma smiled and nodded. We continued our walk, talking about our respective stories. As we walked to the other end of the bridge, Emma kissed me gently on the cheek. Thank you, Grady. It's been a really nice day. I watched her departing back, and a strange feeling welled up inside me. Not passion, not infatuation, but a calm hope. Perhaps this was the beginning of a new life. When I got home, I found a text from Amara. Grady, I want to talk to you. Mark and I broke up and I realized I made a big mistake. Can we give our marriage another chance? I stared at the message with mixed feelings. At one time, this might have been the message I wanted to see the most. But now, I felt a sense of relief. I took a deep breath and replied, Amara, we all need to move on. I forgive you, and I forgive myself, but our marriage is over. I wish you well. After sending this message, I turned off my phone and walked out onto the balcony. The night sky was dotted with stars, and I suddenly felt like the whole world had opened up. I don't know what the future holds, but I know that I'm ready for a new life. Time flies, and it's been 6 months since the divorce. My relationship with Emma was slowly growing, and we started dating regularly, but we're careful not to rush things. We both understood that a real relationship takes time and patience to develop. After work that day, I received an unexpected piece of good news. The head nurse of the hospital was retiring, and the hospital was considering promoting me to take over the position. This meant that I could move to the day shift and my salary would be significantly increased. I excitedly called Emma and asked her out to celebrate. We chose a small restaurant just off the Brooklyn Bridge. Emma poured me a glass of red wine and smiled. Congratulations, Grady. You deserve this opportunity. I looked into Emma's eyes and felt a sudden warmth. Thank you, Emma. Without your support these past 6 months, I might still be where I am. Emma gently took my hand. We've got each other's backs, don't we? Just then, my cell phone rang. It was an unfamiliar number, and I wanted to hang up, but for some reason I answered it. Grady? It was Amara's voice, sounding a little panicked. I need your help. I froze, not knowing how to respond. Emma saw my unease and whispered, It's okay. Go ahead and answer it. I walked outside the restaurant and took a deep breath. What's up, Amara? Amara's voice took on a sobbing tone. I was fired from the company. They said that my relationship with Mark was affecting the work environment. I don't know what to do. I can't pay my mortgage, my credit cards are. Grady, I know it's not my place to beg, but could you just? I close my eyes and feel a rush of mixed emotions. What happened to Amara saddens me, but at the same time I realized that it's no longer my responsibility. Amara, I said as calmly as I could, I'm sorry to hear that, but we're divorced and your problems. I can't help you. Maybe you could seek help from family or friends. There was silence on the other end of the line for a moment, then Amara whispered, I understand. Sorry to bother you. After hanging up the phone, I stood on the street and watched the pedestrians come and go. There was a time when everything about Amara was my responsibility, but now, we've each taken different paths. I returned to the dining room and Emma looked at me with concern. Is everything okay? I hesitated and decided to be honest. It's Amara. She's in some trouble and wants help. Emma nodded thoughtfully. What do you think? I took a deep breath. Honestly, I'm a little overwhelmed. On one hand, I sympathize with her situation. On the other hand, I know I can't get involved in her life anymore. Emma gently held my hand. Grady, you are a kind person, but you are also responsible for your own happiness. Sometimes the best help is for the other person to learn to solve their own problems. I looked at Emma and felt a rush of warmth. She's always been able to see into my heart and give me the support I need most. You're right, I smiled. Thanks for understanding. After dinner, we took a walk along the Brooklyn Bridge. The Manhattan skyline twinkled with lights at night, and it was mesmerizingly beautiful. Grady, Emma stopped abruptly and turned to me. I was thinking, maybe we could plan a trip together? I was a little surprised. Really? Where to? Emma had a gleam in her eye. I've always wanted to go to Italy. Rome, Venice, Tuscany. What do you think? I looked into Emma's expectant eyes and felt a sudden surge of happiness. It wasn't just an invitation to a trip, it was more like a promise for the future. Sounds great, I said, unable to resist placing a soft kiss on her forehead. When do we start planning? Emma smiled and leaned over my shoulder. Starting tomorrow? I can't wait to see you in a handmade Italian suit. We laughed and continued our walk, discussing the details of our trip. I suddenly realized that this could be a turning point in my life. I was no longer the Grady who had been hurt by marital betrayal, but someone who was ready for a new life and a new adventure. On the way home, I thought of Amara again, and I hoped that she would get through this and find happiness of her own. But I also realized that it was no longer my responsibility. I've turned a new page in my life, and I can't wait to see what comes next. The next morning, I woke up feeling more relaxed than ever. I opened the window and let the early morning sunlight flood the room. My cell phone lit up and it was a message from Emma. Good morning, honey. Ready to start our Italian plans? I smiled and replied, of course, I can't wait. Putting down my cell phone, I looked at myself in the mirror. I no longer saw the man who had been beaten down by the failure of his marriage, but a man full of hope and courage. I knew that no matter what the future held, I was ready for it. I took a deep breath and put on my jacket ready to go out. A new day had begun, and my new life was just beginning. Thank you for taking the time to listen to today's story. If you enjoyed it, please like and subscribe if you haven't already. If you have a story to share about your own or someone else's experience, please feel free to contact me. Take care.